We all talk about discourse and how hard it is for it to be civil. And sometimes we laugh about it a little bit. But my next guest in part 2 of our conversation is going to tell us this is serious stuff and we need to learn it, and he will give us tips on how to learn it. We need to regulate ourselves to be able to have civil discourse that is fiercely civil. Or, he says, we're going to do great damage to each other, to our planet, and a whole lot more. So it's life or death, what we're talking about here, and how to have fierce civility. So join me for this conversation, part 2 of our conversation with Joe Weston. But first, let me invite you to go to my website, pastor-paul.com. Check out my mentorship program, Deconstruction U. For those of you who have left your church behind, but not your faith or spirituality, Deconstruction U is for you. It's where we talk theology and can I believe differently? Can I rethink, which is my favorite word? Can I rethink God? Can I rethink hell? Can I rethink how I look at the Bible so that my faith and spirituality can still be available to me while not having to go back to some church that makes it very difficult and injurious to follow my faith and spirituality? Yes, you can continue to follow your faith or find new spirituality and do so in a context that still feels comfortable to you from your heritage. We'll tell you how on Deconstruction U, a mentorship with Pastor Paul. Go to pastor-paul.com, find out more about Deconstruction U. It is so worth it to do it. Give it a try, and we'll jump in together today. Now, to part 2 of our unconventional conversation with Pastor Paul and our guest, Joe Weston, author and peace advocate. Let me introduce you to Joe Weston, who is my friend. He's with the Weston Network and the Fierce Civility Project. Joe is an international trainer, author, lecturer, consultant, coach, professor, and above all else, and I love this, an advocate for lasting peace. One of the comments here on our live feed from Alexis, she says, I think it's too soon for civility, says Alexis. Too much sludge is still coming out from the cesspit. Cover it up, it will stink under the Band-Aid of civility. So what is your response to Alexis there raising a point about civility being a cover-up for bad things?
First of all, Alexis, you're obviously a poet. You write that so eloquently describe our current situation in the world. I'd like to quote you on that. That was brilliant. It's sludge, and we're going through the sludge. And I would say I see it the same way. If you notice a fierce civility shift in the terminology, we don't say agree or disagree. I say I see it the same way. Or if I don't see it the same way, I say I don't see it the same way. I see it the same way because civility on its own is not going to solve our problems. And that's a key part of this work is, the title of this, Can Civility Be Fierce? I think next time, Paul, when we have a conversation, we should have the conversation, can fierce be civil? Because you like that, huh?
I do like that. I do like, because we're in this season of alpha male, and we need real men, and yeah. I think it is fierce. Coming from a Christian background like me, I think Jesus, the story of Jesus, is about a guy who was a real badass in his ability not to have to strike back against his attackers. I think that takes serious balls, if you can let me use that type of slang. And we have this kind of swing in the other direction of alpha male, and we need real men who will do violent things to keep women safe. And it's so I think there's a real juxtaposition between the courage to not raise your fist is really more powerful than the guy that will go to fight anytime he feels a sense of safety and discomfort.
I would say Jesus Christ is the perfect example of someone who practices fierce civility, where they're able to be, literally, like in their hearts, in a way that we all cultivate, dream of being, aspire to be in, with a level of fierceness of standing in their truth and their power, and to do that in a way where it gives every individual that comes towards them, even the ones who may want to harm, the opportunity to come back to their humanity. And in a sense, and the ultimate goal of someone who practices fierce civility is to train themselves to be a nurturer and protector, and that we can rewire our basic primal state of either being defender, aggressor, or acquiescing, and becoming nurturer and protector. So I would say, yes, civility as we're currently doing it could never stand up to the lack of civility we are currently seeing. We have seen a breakdown of civil discourse in a way that I don't think we've seen that in my generation. And I have the definition of civility, and you'll get an idea. Alexis, this might you might find this interesting. The definition of civility is cultured courtesy, politeness, a polite act or expression characterized by taste, refinement, or restraint. Now that may work in a 19th century novel in ways, and there may be some communities where some people can practice that in some ways, but that is not going to stand fiercely and match what we're currently seeing with lack of civility and a rewarding of lack of civility. So we need to, and I call that chronic niceness. We're all suffering from chronic niceness. Either we actually are perpetrators of it or victims of it. And chronic niceness is these like mask-like, these smiles we have that are facades. And we can do the cruelest things with very civil words and very civil smiles and very civil way we approach ourselves. And it's perpetuating the same cycle. And the fierce civility is trying to break that polarization of, you have people who are either like on the side of aggression and fierceness in the most aggressive and violent term of it, and you have people who are suffering from chronic niceness. And fierce civility is kind of a synthesis, an alchemy of both, that we can be fierce in our civility. And because the definition of civility that I mentioned, unfortunately, if we hold on to that, we perpetuate the same problems. And I always say, in a sense, where we say yes when we should say no, we say no when we should say yes, we say nothing when injustices are happening, when the people that our families or our institutions or where we go to worship are causing harm to others. And it requires a deep level of fierceness to not fight that, because fighting the system just makes the system stronger. Becoming a bully to try to bully a bully just makes you a bully. And that fierceness, Paul, as you know, with a lot of the things that you're exploring and researching, to be able to stand in your truth and live a lifestyle and a way of being where, and I've worked with people around the world, in the Middle East and Europe and various places, where people can literally be killed for choosing to live their lives according to how they believe that's authentic to themselves. That's fierce. And there's a story that I always tell in terms of understanding this in the context of fierceness. It's a Taoist story where the master says to the student, what is stronger, a mighty oak or a blade of grass? And after a long debate, the conclusion is that in a monsoon, the mighty oak will snap like a twig, but the blade of grass will always persevere and ultimately stand tall. So there are times in our lives when we need to be that mighty oak. We need to stand strong. We need to be protectors for our families, for ourselves, for what we believe in. And there are also times when we have to practice yielding and adapting. And that doesn't make us weak. That doesn't mean that doesn't make us submissive. There's actually a lot of strength in that. And I would say, if I may continue, that it's in that softness that there's power. That's the martial arts aspect of it. That's a lot of the water, for instance, the way rivers flow. They create deep rivers, and that the more we practice that, the more we can find that we can deal with other people's reactivity and do it in a way where we can still stay engaged.
I need your help to support the ministry. I don't pass the tithe plate. I don't take up offerings. I don't take pledges from big donors who can tell us what to do and what not to do. I just want to be in partnership with you. Even $5.99 means the world to help me continue to build this community and this discussion for the world, that God is not mad at you. Would you check it out? pastor-paul.com. We've been talking about fierce civility and as a way to deal with the root causes of polarization in our culture. And you alluded to this, but is this a new thing? I mean, Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton shot guns at each other over disputes. We've had, but is it worse today? Sometimes we feel like this is the worst it's ever been. Is it a new thing, and is it an international thing, or is it kind of uniquely American, or at least more American perhaps than some other places?
Well, I would say America is always going to big gulp it. So yeah, it is. And being a citizen also of the Netherlands, having lived there for many years, and talking to a lot of my European friends, the level of polarization is off the charts at the moment. And for me, polarization is about stagnation. It's like two rams ramming into each other, trying to, I'm right, no, I'm right, no, I'm going to win, and you're going to lose, and we get, no, I'm good, and you're bad, and we get caught in this, and all that energy. If you think the rams, if they don't do this, but if they were to do this, just keep ramming, they would exhaust themselves. And I feel like we're doing that over the last certainly 50 or 60 years, but certainly the last decade or two. We've seen an increase in an ongoing breakdown of civil discourse, civic engagement, independent critical thinking, and personal agency, which is what is causing the anxiety, and our hearts are shut down. I think a lot of it has to do with economically, that many of us are now living in communities where we don't engage with people who are different anymore. The pandemic exacerbated that because we weren't being out and engaging with people who were different. Politics has become polarized. The media has kept us in this state of constant polarization and dysregulation. And therefore, this idea, going back to Alexa's question, this idea of civility, it's almost like something from the past, this idea. And unfortunately, what I think is that those of us who do hold on to this idea of civility, it's become elitist, which only creates more suspicion. And it's interesting, I start my book with a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt that she said in 1960, at the height of the nuclear threat between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Interesting, the cycles we're in. And she said, we have to face the fact that either all of us are going to die together, or we are going to have to learn to live together. And if we are to live together, we have to talk. And those are wise words. And basically, fierce civility is answering that call. I offer an upgraded communication model that can meet the lack of civility and breakdown of civil discourse and personal agency, so that we can get back to each other. And for me, there's a real spiritual component to this. When I look at the world system and see how I refer to the world system as the global heart. And our global heart is not well. It's really not well. It's total, and the cause of that, I'm not a doctor, but I have my prognosis, is that we have created a world system where we are technologically overfed and spiritually malnourished. And that, therefore, as any good doctor, we need a balanced diet of both technological nourishment as well as spiritual nourishment. And again, that's really key what I'm saying, that I'm not saying we just need one or the other. We benefit from the technology. And for me, that's about the intellect, all the things, economics and into the intellect. We need the intellect. We need to cultivate that. However, it's out of balance. We're gorging ourselves in that, and we're malnourished in the spiritual things, which is about cultivating more humanity, becoming the nurturer and protector, and qualities of the heart, which include wisdom. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah,
Paul, I've got plenty more to say about that, but what are your thoughts on that?
So much to say. And when religion versus spirituality, I think, is important to look at here, because I come from a very religious Christian evangelical background. And at some point I found my spiritual pursuit through evangelicalism actually made my heart more sick toward other people. It brought its own exclusiveness and its own supremacy, and made it difficult for me to connect with others, and then a really exclusive view of God. And really this sort of angry God made me angry too, just like I found right-wing media was making me angry. So I'm finding in this season, and I know you are a practitioner of spiritual practices that have influenced me in a lot of ways, and finding a better route of spirituality that draws me. I think I define it like, is it drawing me to my better self? Is it drawing me to connect with love and goodness that is beyond my own ability to be good and to love others? Then that is a true spirituality to pursue. And if religion gets into the mix sometimes, I think it takes us away from being drawn to love and goodness, to being more, again, back into that echo chamber life of we've got it right, and we need to convince everybody else that we're right because they're wrong. So it can be its own exclusion if we're not careful. Of course,
and that comes right into how I would look at, if I were to redefine civility. I just redefined fierceness of what it's, and what I want to say about that is that wherever we are completely rigid, like that oak tree, we will snap. If we're rigid, physically, emotionally, mentally, even spiritually, we're easily susceptible to others, and we basically snap. But in terms of civility and the spiritual nourishment, I could trace that with my studies. I'm not saying I'm a scholar in this, but of all different religions and all different spiritual traditions and ethical traditions and native indigenous traditions, I came up with 5 common highest guiding principles that you could extract from all of them to get, in a sense, to get rid of all the noise. And if we could just resonate from that, that to me is what true civility is. And those 5 highest common guiding principles are respect, dignity, which to me is about being valued, belonging, freedom, and collaboration. And if you follow the teachings of Jesus Christ, or any great teacher or any great spiritual being, to me, that's at the essence. I'm not saying I'm right. That's just how I've interpreted it. People might have their own view of that. But the importance in that is that that's what will cultivate our spiritual nourishment, is if we can cultivate respect, dignity, belonging, freedom, and collaboration, and not just for ourselves, and not expect it, like feel like we are privileged and we deserve it, but to realize that it's a blessing that we can feel respected, that we can have dignity, that we belong, that we are free, and that we can collect. It's a blessing. And you cultivate the highest level of those principles when you realize, if I can feel the blessings of that, then I will commit my life on a daily basis to make sure that every human being on this planet has access to belonging, to dignity, to respect, that they determine what for them it means to be free, and that we learn how to collaborate and work together. That to me is what spiritual nourishment is. That's to me the fierceness in fierce civility, to become a nurturer and protector, to realize I have privilege, I have access to information, power, and resources. If I don't, then I want to find a way to cultivate that. If I do, then it's my obligation to support others in getting that as well.
Yeah, because that belonging is such a natural human, not just desire, but need. We are pack animals, but if belonging becomes agreement around a set of rules or ideas or ideologies, that's when it can become really damaging. So I think that collaboration is really important. And in Christianity, we use the two highest commands, love God, love your neighbor as yourself. And then Jesus described who is your neighbor as that person from another race, another religion, another nationality that you don't think worthy of favor as much as you're worthy of it. And you've coined your own term of love thy stranger. So what does love thy stranger mean exactly?
Oh, I love that you brought that up. So in one of the chapters, so the key to the work, if we want to be part of the movement of fierce civility, of being nurturers and protectors, and breaking the gridlock of the polarization, getting more of us back to our hearts, where we can really engage with each other. One of the key concepts of that is finding alliances in surprising places. Because I've been saying this for so many years in all of my lectures and workshops and discussions. If only hanging out with people who already agree with you was going to solve our world problems, we would have already solved our world problems. So therefore, the conclusion is, if we want to solve our world problems that's more equitable and sustainable and inclusive for everyone, then we have to have the courage and the skills to reach out and connect with people who are different and hold different views in a way that's safe and that can get to deeper levels of correct collaboration. And if you're doing it from your humanity to the humanity of others, you cut through the mental constructs of religion and political beliefs and all of that, and you get back to your humanity and their humanity, and suddenly you're seeing a human being who also wants to advocate for more civility and is tired of this mess. And that's how you build new alliances. So it starts with the concept of love thy neighbor, but expanding that globally. We can no longer be isolationists. We can no longer just be in our own communities and think that other people's suffering is not going to eventually affect us. It's naive. I don't, if that sounds judgmental, I'm sorry, but I just think it's naive, short-sighted. So we have to, and so love thy neighbor, when it was first presented, I'm going to assume a couple of millennia ago or more, it was for a community that maybe had a couple of dozen people or more. So that made sense. We have to expand it to include every human being on this planet. However, so it's love thy neighbor. We have to cultivate that. But sometimes we get into this polarity of how do we then reach out to people who are different? And of course, there are teachings in love thy enemy. I don't know if that's such a healthy thing. That's also can be like a false sense of chronic niceness. Why should I turn the other cheek? And especially if I come, I'm not speaking for myself, but for people who come from oppressed societies. Why should I love an enemy, someone who literally thinks I'm less than them, or who has harmed me in some way? But again, you get in this polarization of loved one and enemy, and to break again the power of the pivot, you need some kind of shift. So I introduced that we should stop or consider not doing it anymore, to lump all people into the binary of loved one and enemy. That's what's maintaining the stagnation of the polarization. If you introduce a third, you shake it up and you have more options. So introduce the concept of stranger. The beauty of that is that if you do the math, with 8 billion people on the planet, you can never tell me that I don't have any strangers that I can engage with. There's got to be at least 7 billion of them that you could engage with. And it's in that we build small bridges. We don't have to reach out to the ones who are the most extreme, where we could get harmed. And in fact, engaging with them and trying to find commonality can only just exacerbate the problem. But there are so many people who aren't so triggering, that are strangers. They're your neighbors. They're people in the supermarket. They're on the other side of the world. If we can commit to looking at people as strangers and realizing that may not threaten us as much, we can build those alliances, which suddenly makes that's a way of bringing us more into balance with technological and spiritual nourishment.
I think, and fierce civility is such a great term for it. You know, in the teachings of turn the other cheek, and you know, Jesus is quoted in biblical text as saying, "If forced to go a mile, go two." You know, it's turn the status quo on its head if status quo isn't working, and the concept of going 2 miles was a Roman law that, as the Roman oppressors had taken over Palestine, a soldier could force anyone to carry their equipment for them for 1 mile. And so there was this idea of like, well, I'll carry it for a mile, but then I'll tell you what an SOB you are. And Jesus is saying the more powerful position is to say, oh, you want me to go a mile? I'll go 2. And then we could start to translate into that. Well, maybe through me standing in my power, even as I'm being oppressed, I start to have an impact on the oppressor. I start to show them that I'm not nearly the threat that they think I am. And we start to break down some of these barriers. Because I've found it, I've lost a lot of Christian friends and am now very close friends with people I thought I could never be friends with before. Because once you get across the table from somebody or on a Zoom together with somebody, and I saw President Biden say this about Dylan Mulrooney, a trans woman, the other day. Like, when you sit together, all of a sudden you're like, this is who Fox News is telling me to be afraid of. This is who my pastor is saying is evil and going to hell. They seem pretty kind. They seem pretty cool. And so I think you're right that none of that is like, slaves, you know, allow your master to beat you and say, thank you, give me more. But it is like, stand in your power and let them see that you are human and worthwhile, that you value yourself. And I really think that is the fierceness of that teaching.
Well, first of all, you brought it all the way back to who's telling your story, right? So when you do that, you realize, wow, the story I've been told, that they're evil or that they're bad or whatever, they're going to harm me, or I'm going to be contaminated by their viewpoints or whatever. It's just not true. You won't know that until you investigate. And you're doing that so beautifully. And in essence, and what you do so beautifully, Paul, is imagine if we just thought of ourselves as creating spaces of refuge. That wherever we go, when we're sitting in a restaurant, when we're whatever, that we create safe space. And that so that people can show up authentically and show us who they truly are. And what that does is it cuts through the mental constructs. All of our problems at this moment, I would say, if we're stuck in our heads and the intellect, are caused, all of them, many of them, or you could view it this way, by our mental constructs, is what you're saying. If we don't examine it, we just believe, we believe that we're separate. If we have more time, we can show how we each creature on this planet is completely and utterly interdependent and interconnected. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Every creature in nature, as human beings, and the idea that we're separate is simply a mental construct. So since it's simply a mental construct, we have the power to change that mental construct and come up with a new one that says that we are all interrelated in some way, some more than others. I don't have to like you. I don't have to see it the same way you do. However, I need to acknowledge that we're all in this together. There's a lot of what Eleanor Roosevelt said. We're either all going to die together or we're going to learn to live together. And that's where we are right now.
And it's love your neighbor as yourself. There is a self-love involved in that command. And, there's just so many examples of this. I remember watching a documentary about Zero Dark 30, about the American killing of Osama bin Laden. And a CIA agent said, the only way we ever solve the Middle East crisis, or whatever the term was that he uses, we have to stop bombing things. We have to stop bombing things over there, because every time we bomb something, we prove to the people of that part of the world that we are what Al-Qaeda is saying we are. We verify their terms, and more parents start giving their kids over to terrorist groups. Yeah. And so there does have to be a point in the Hatfields and McCoys. Somebody has to stop killing people from the other side, or eventually you're just all gone. Yeah. And there's no peace in living in all of that. So yes, there is a power and a fierceness in laying down our fists and trying to use our strength of loving ourselves to love people that maybe we feel like we can't love otherwise, to try to come to some sort of peace that gives us all the space to live well.
That's beautiful, Paul. You speak that so beautifully. Can I read a couple of quotes that in this time?
Sure.
And I quote this, I have this in my book, The Teachings of Jesus Christ. Love thy neighbor as you would love thyself. The Teachings of the Buddha. Look for your own happiness and you find suffering. Seek the hardship of helping others and you experience true happiness. The Teachings of Muhammad. No one of you is a believer until he desires for his brother that which he desires for himself. The Teachings of the Jewish mystics. What is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow man. That is entire law. All the rest is commentary. So yeah, commonality. There's a common theme running through all of that.
That's a universal principle, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. Let's finish with this. And I've gone a little over the time I told you we were going to go, and I hope that's okay. But what would you say is one thing that people who are hanging out here with us can do starting today to make a difference in all of this turmoil in our culture right now?
I would say reach out to trust your heart and your intuition. If you're just feeling, wow, I've been thinking this person's been popping into my head, send them a text, just a heart emoji, because you don't know, that could be they could be really struggling, and they could be even considering taking their lives in that moment, and that one text might shift that all for them. Think about ways of becoming a nurturer and protector. Think about and to expand that. What can you do if you're on public transportation or in a public place? Take out your earbuds and listen and see what's around you, and engage with others. And if it feels safe, engage with people you don't know. Make sure that you are taking care of yourself. Cultivate resilience. Find ways to renew your energy. If you're listening to this, and if you have some spiritual practice or committed to something, the world needs you right now. How can you cultivate your own personal agency and find ways to replenish and nurture yourself? I teach a lot. I teach a course on stress reduction and resilience, and with people who suffer from burnout and high levels of chronic stress. And I always say, I find it so funny that we will panic if we walk into a public place and we look at our phone and we have 2% on our phone. We will panic to run to find a place we can plug in our charger. If we had that same level of panic when our battery, our internal battery, was at 2%, we would be a very different world, and you would be much more vibrant, joyful, healthy, balanced, and clear. So we take care of our devices and our cars, but more often than we take care of ourselves. So think about what you can do to nourish yourself physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. And you will find that you will be able to get more done with less effort. You'll feel more powerful and resilient to actually find ways to find win-win solutions with others and to bridge and listen.
Beautiful stuff. It's Fierce Civility. If you're listening to this on the podcast, the book is out. Go to joeweston.com and check out all the opportunities to get the book. I highly recommend it. And I think this is a season where we need people who can be fiercely civil and change the world, Joe. I really do.
Thank you. Yeah, this is fun.
Always fun to talk to you. So thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us today. Go check out the book, Fierce Civility, joeweston.com, and also go to my website, pastor-paul.com. I want you to help me continue to grow the work of the Pastor Paul community here. So pastor-paul.com. You can subscribe. You can look at my coaching services and all the things we do there, because we need people who are fiercely civil and able to do a little bit of conflict and hang out. We'll talk to you again soon. God is not mad at you. God is not mad at the world.